Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm gonna go through the mastering process of Sinners, or at least I'm going to explain some parts that I'm that I'm doing in this video. And yeah, I mean, first things first, I don't have to do this all the time, or like I don't want to even do this necessarily all the time, but whenever I listen to any well, it's not just for in the case of stereo masters, but this is obviously going to be the case for mixing and even just stem mastering projects. That I'm going to ask myself the question, like, does this track sound already like real to me? Like, does it have a vibe? Does it have something that I have something to bounce off? Like, so basically the question is, does it only need a little bit of like technical fixing in terms of like a little bit of an EQ here, a little bit of compression there, put on a mastering limiter, and we're pretty much good to go? Or do I feel that maybe we can like add a little bit more vibe to it, or do I maybe have something in mind when I go off of my own taste, for example? And this is probably in the middle of between these two things, because obviously, like, when you add any sort of analog emulation, and how I froze the screen like perfectly like explains what I'm trying to do here. It's like I'm not necessarily even looking to like EQ too much using this this channel strip, or like even to engage the compression. It's just that I want to boost the input a little bit, or like maybe I might sometimes play around with the EQ, but it's not the whole point. The whole point is to give a little bit of this flavor into the song, which I will, try my best not to destroy the original idea or like the original vibe. Like I don't want to go against the vision of the artist, obviously. But if I feel that, we can give it a little bit more vibe, either in this direction, which is the SSL-E channel strip, or like there's, some Neve panel emulations, API, we can go a whole lot of different directions. This is what I felt at the moment that would that I just wanted to try out. And yeah, I just wanted to see if this works or not. And yeah, after playing around with this SSL channel strip for a little while, I felt that maybe this was a little bit too much, or like a little bit going against the direction of the artistic vision. Obviously, I'm not. So when I recorded this, that it was quite a while ago. It was in August, and I don't 100% remember what I was thinking at the moment when I do this. And this is also why I don't. I tried this at first, but this is why I can't really properly like do these voiceovers whenever I'm actually on the job, because it would just take me out of the flow. Like whenever I'm doing these like moves and just switching out from one channel strip for another, like one plugin to another, like one preset to another, like etc. I'm pretty much in the flow, and I can't. So sometimes it's funny, but sometimes I don't even remember why I did what. I just know that something is clicking at that point. And probably this is also something that comes with experience. Like obviously when you do these for the first times in your life, you can't really just get into flow and get things right. It's like you need to learn it, you need to practice it, you need to like get the, develop this taste and develop this this knowledge, I guess, so when you hear it, you will be able to recognize it. And what happened here, in my opinion, is that I just heard that the SSL-E channel strip just was not, vibing the same way with the instrumental as I wanted it to be. And so my thinking at the time must have been to like try out different channel strips. And so this is why I loaded up the API, and this just felt better to me in a sense that it didn't stand in the way of the song, but it also gave it a little bit of a nice boost on the input. And it should be also told is like this particular channel strip behaves a little bit differently than, for example, the Neve or the SSL-E channel strip would. The main difference is going to be like this is a more bumpy, it's a little bit more noticeable when you push the input here. It's going to be a little bit more forgiving in the higher regions, but it's going to like push something in the low end that sometimes works out wonders, but in some cases it's going to completely destroy certain songs or like certain low ends in certain types of genres. So this is absolutely not a channel strip that I would be able to use all the time. It's kind of interesting because when I think about using, for example, the Neve channel strip emulation for these like warming up type of purposes, I would say that's going to be good 60% of the time. And then you're going to have the SSL emulations, which are going to be good like 30% of the time. And this is the 10% plugin, but here this is what we needed, so I just went with it. And once again, I'm not really looking to engage compression or like even to EQ anything. Yeah, I'm really just looking to give it the input from the actual unit to give it a little bit of this drive that the input really. I don't have a better word for this. Yeah, about this tonal balance control, like in certain cases I see that this is a little bit overhyped in a sense. It's very good and a very helpful tool, but you should not base your entire you know, it won't always tell you the truth, in a sense that sometimes certain projects, and especially right now we are mastering a song, so when you're producing a song, you can, you know, produce it in a certain way where, you know, you won't have enough low mid information, for example, in the song to begin with. In those cases, obviously for the low mid you're going to fall behind the lines, and, you know, maybe in the low region you're going to be above, in the high mid again you might end up being above, and this is just what it is. It was a production decision that reflected it on the mixing stage and the mastering stage, which resulted in a tonal balance that was not right. But this is what I'm trying to say here, is that if something was produced that way, it's probably still good. So it's also very important to always be aware of what's the material at hand, because sometimes if you want to like very rigidly try to, like, you know, to get into these reference ranges, sometimes you're going to like just go against the vision of the production, and yeah, I just wouldn't always recommend it. But that being said, this is a very, very, very helpful tool in, let's say, 90% of cases. And but I just like to reference this, and I just like to like look at it even like visually to like see where do I stand, because sometimes, you know, it's probably not true after working on this song for only like 1 minute, but sometimes my ears also might get, you know, tired. Sometimes it's the 7th project of the day and I'm just, you know, I kind of lost perspective and whatnot. Visual things, you cannot really lose perspective. It's like, you know, it's ones and zeros in a sense that, you know, you'll always see what's happening, even if you can't hear it for any particular reason. I usually trust my ears, but it's just very nice in general to have visual feedback, especially if you know the tools that you're using. And I use this all the time, all day, every day. So I just really have this, I just, you know how this is going to like behave at any certain situation. So I kind of know what to look out for if I'm looking for something. Like, I don't know how to say this any better. As far as compression goes on the output, this is a plugin that I'm going to use this for mastering. I'm going to use this whenever I'm just producing and I'm just, you know, chucking on a quick output chain. This is the UAD SSL G-Bus compressor, but you can use any other manufacturers, any other emulation. This is the one that I like the best in terms of like how it sounds. This is one plugin that's going to be good 99% of the time. It's like this is the gold mine in basically. So whenever you need compression on the output, this is like there's a 99% chance that this is going to be like at least one of the players for compression. And I prefer to, it again might not happen in this case, but in most cases I prefer to set up compression on the output in a way where I'm running one compressor unit, which is going to be most often this one. This is going to be the first that, you know, that grabs the signal, like really. And then I'm going to add another one, which is going to be a little bit like so, and I'm going to set a relatively fast setting because again, this is kind of like my taste, and like also I'm working on dance music, which is like relatively like high BPM. You generally speaking are going to need like higher, or I mean faster attack and release times as well in most cases, well not always, but in most cases this is what's going to sound the most transparent and the most fitting for the genre. But after this is there, in many cases I'm going to add another compressor which is going to be a lot slower, and depending again on the vibe, like if I want something to be a little bit more like noticeable I guess, then I might go for a Fairchild emulation, but if I want things to not so much in your face but like really just you know for maybe like to really just control, for example, the coarse parts, like, just to bring those down, like let's say a dB or so, then I might, go for the Manley VariMU, or, there are countless other great output compressors. These are my, I would say, most often used compressors in terms of like serial compression. And sometimes I might only use one Fairchild or only use one VariMU, and this really just depends on the actual material at hand. Like dynamic EQs, it's kind of interesting because dynamic EQs. So there was a time, I would say, 2 years ago, let's say, when I first discovered that dynamic EQs are much better in terms of like fixing these like little spots than multi-band compressors, which I used to use, like to just focus in on just one particular range and then dial in what I want. And I just felt that I always at least after discovering these dynamic EQ plugins, like from Ozone, and the other one I use is the Sonox, I believe. So that with these ones, I was just always able to get a more transparent result faster, and it was just sounding better. So this was around 2 years ago when I kind of like got into the habit of using these plugins. But in the last, I would say, like 6 months, mostly from a taste perspective, I try not to use them as much as I used to use them, because I feel that I might have overused them a little bit, and I pushed myself through the edge. It's not the right phrase what I was looking for, but I can't quite know how to say this in English better. But the whole point is that not every problem requires a dynamic EQ solution, and I was trying, it's not even just trying, but I was actively doing stuff that I was trying to do. I was trying to solve the problems with dynamic EQ that I probably should not have solved with dynamic EQ for one reason or another. It's a different discussion. But now, this whole thing being said, for stereo masters, sometimes dynamic EQ is going to be the only solution to certain types of problems. Yeah, I'm not sure if here, like, because seeing what I did here, I'm not sure if this, I could not have achieved it with just a simple other EQ or anything else. But yeah, I really don't remember what I was thinking here, but let's see what I'm gonna do. Now, this particular EQ is also something that's a mainstay on my output channels. It has a sound, and I like it, and you might not, but because of my own taste, I'm going to use this in 90% of the cases. Sometimes I will not use any analog emulation EQs, only digital ones that are perfectly neutral. This was not really neutral. This one has a little bit of a like, I would say the most noticeable thing that this is doing is like it gives harmonics is a little bit exaggeration, because it's not really going to be like audible in a sense, but it's going to be like you will be able to feel it. Like it fills the space up a little bit in this mid-high range, sort of, like, especially when you boost like these ranges, these top three. With this bottom one, generally speaking, I'm not really going to play around too much, because in my experience, it's not doing as good of a job what I can just achieve with some other EQs. So with this particular one, I prefer these higher ranges, and obviously I can set this bottom one to 1K as well, but it's still like relatively low range. So all I'm trying to say is that mainly I'm going to be focusing on the higher ranges whenever I'm using this particular EQ, because this is where it shines the most in my experience. And yeah, what I'm doing here is exactly this, that I'm just trying to sound stupid, but I'm trying to glue together the higher ranges, so that it's the hi-hat doesn't necessarily stick out from the whole thing, and then all the synths just also flow together. And yeah, sometimes also, like, it's kind of like interesting, because with this particular EQ, what you can also do is that I'm cross stepping the filters. So this is at 2.2K and this is 2.7K. And so what this is going to do is it's going to like give this interesting curve, when you actually like see this visually. Like, for example, you can load up this plugin in what's it, Audio Doctor, I believe it's called, the software, where you can see what actually these plugins are doing. I'm just playing a little bit around with the curve, like to see if this helps. And if I exited this plugin without removing it, that probably means that I kind of achieved what I was looking for. And then obviously, like for stereo masters, one thing that's going to be very important, and this is almost as important as the dynamics and the actual frequency range, like the tonal balance, is to check for any sort of like stereo improvement possibilities. So sometimes you're going to do more destruction with with these types of maneuvers than how much good you'll do, but it's always at least worth a try to to check if like any particular range like boosting or cutting any particular range will help the song like translate any better. And how I usually set up this plugin is like what I'm also doing here right now is like I'm going to like set one filter at 100, another one at 300, and another one at 2K, and these are going to be my 4 ranges around these crossover points. I don't always start by monoing the signal and then checking one by one all of them. I'm just gonna like essentially see and listen. Do I hear like a noticeable improvement, or do I hear like something I just completely lost in terms of like it's getting now lost in the mix because it was only in the stereo, and if I, for example, narrowed it, one instrument can get completely lost, so obviously that's going to be a no-go. And yeah, here I went with pretty pretty high adjustments. Like for example, this is not something that I would normally do unless I really feel that I really need to like increase the width. For example, like these 25 values, this is 25% of like increase in the stereo field. That's going to be extremely noticeable. So this is, again, it's not something that I do all the time, but here probably I just felt that this is going to be the way to go. To also touch on this for a little bit, like I listen and I also work on a lot of songs like actively, like every single day almost, and so I have a very good idea about how things should more or less sound, if you want to be competitive on Spotify. And this is how I kind of like set up my workflow and set up my whole my whole thought process whenever I do anything is basically about how this is going to translate on like streaming platforms, because this is the most important. And if someone comes to me and says that that person only cares about the actual loudness because he or like she only wants to play this in a club setup, or like it's only going to be like a SoundCloud whatever project, obviously I'm going to like understand the situation, and in these cases I'm not going to care that much about like these like vibe or like flavoring type of compression. I'm just going to hammer the limiter, and I'm just going to solve that. We can push the loudness as much as we can, and obviously sometimes this is done, or like sometimes this is going to be achieved via compression, but digital tools without all that much flavoring are going to be in most cases better for like purely loudness operations. But obviously the production has to also allow me to do these things. But yeah, here my goal was to, when this song comes on Spotify after whatever the big hit is today, it's going to still sound competitive. And to achieve this, we will need a little bit of a dynamics, we will need a little bit of flavor, we will need like a very nice bottom end, we will need a very nice high end, and we will need obviously a very nice stereo image. This is what I am striving for here. And yeah, I'm circling back on the serial compression. This is what I'm setting up now. By the way, this is also what I what I explained. Is like I only set up this compressor, the second one, so that it eats like a dB or so from the drop or the chorus parts. And yeah, this is, in most cases, this is going to be more than enough. And this is like a much slower and a much more transparent unit than the SSL G-Bus emulation. So this is great for this job, especially here. And probably because I already played around with the imaging, I didn't do this, but in many cases, especially when a mix is already like sounding pretty nice to me, I just feel that I want a little bit more like 3D effect. This is one particular compressor where it just sounds fantastic in almost all the time. Like again, I'm gonna say like 95% of the time. It's like if you unlink the sidechain, because what it's going to do is like it's going to listen to the left signal and the right signal differently. Or I mean, you can set the compressor up into mid-side mode, but I usually leave it in left-right. And so what this does is it's going to be like a very tiny bit of a difference, obviously as any with any stereo signal which has a teeny tiny bit amount of left-right, it's also going to react a little bit differently. And in many cases, this is what gives this like very 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 3D effect of any stereo mix or like master in the project that I'm working on. Like this is one of the secret sauces that I that I have, and obviously for this effect I also would need to like engage this compressor to like do a little bit more work. Like still I very rarely will push this particular compressor above 2 dB of compression. But around that range, this effect will be like pretty noticeable, and it has the potential to make a pretty big difference. With an otherwise more or less I would say like that. Whenever I think of this is when I think of like the frequency range in terms of like the tonal balance is nice, and then I also have the dynamics sorted, but I just need a little bit more like stereo something, and this is what I'm usually going to try out in those cases. But here I didn't do it. Once again, I probably once again I don't remember why exactly, but I'm going to assume because I already did a lot of enhancement in the stereo field. It's like probably would have been like too much to even like do this as well. And there's this EQ that I also loaded up, pretty much working on the same range that I was also like addressing with the dynamic EQ, even though I didn't engage the actual dynamic section, like the compression. So my thoughts are too fast for me to like completely articulate them. But what I was trying to say as I was looking at the footage is like sometimes as I address one thing at one particular plugin, especially when I already have so much, it happens that I might have to go back to a different stage. And I was kind of expecting to like again double check this adjustment against the stereo width procedures, which it's just that again, like just looking at the screen, just looking at the values, like I'm listening at very low volumes, so just so it doesn't like affect me as I talk through the material. I was kind of expecting that I'm going to maybe dial back from the stereo imaging, but instead I opened up this dynamic EQ and I'm going to like do something here to adjust whatever was happening. Now again, this is just my thoughts about this thing that I'm as I'm looking at it. I don't remember what I was thinking exactly at the time, but usually whenever I do this, what I feel is that I don't necessarily want to lose the attack from the high end, but I feel that the sustain of it is a little bit too much, and this is why I'm opting for a dynamic EQ where I can leave the attack more or less in place, and I can just affect this feeling that it's not going to be like too much of a all the time, but it's going to be a little bit more of a it's a little bit of a shaping. Obviously, you cannot do an absolutely perfect job using only like one dynamic EQ on a stereo master. Like I would need obviously the full mix to like properly do this with like transient shaping, or like I don't even know how I would address it just by like thinking about it, because this might also be like different from one case to another case. But here obviously this is going to be my best bet to try to work this out using a dynamic EQ. And yeah, probably this is what I did, and this is why I did it. And also, whenever I use a dynamic EQ, this is something I'd like to try out. So this is kind of a double-edged sword, because this is again so the kind of procedure that can completely wreck a song, or like completely like make a world of a difference in a positive direction as well. That using these like shelving filters. Doing a little bit of a bump in the high end, and doing a little bit of a pull down in the low end, and this is what I'm doing here. And this is something I'm gonna just try out in many cases, and sometimes I'm going to decide against it, sometimes I'm going to like leave it. I mean, let's see what happens here. But the overall philosophy behind these moves is just that if I feel that the low end to the high end ratio is a little bit overpowering, but I don't necessarily just want to like use a tilting EQ to like that directly like switch the balance between them, then I'm only going to address these top regions and the bottom regions, and I'm going to like listen to what happens with the attack and the sustain whenever I do this. And yeah, but as I've said, this is sometimes going to be like an absolutely 100% without a doubt positive kind of procedure, but in other cases it's going to be like a completely out of place, and it's going to just, you know, make the song like feel a little bit too floating without like real low end, or like it's going to mess up the high end. So it's I would say this is a procedure that works 30% of the time. So this is not a high percentage, like just throw it on and leave it all the time, but it's going to be something that's, you know, always worth a try, especially whenever I look at waveforms like this, which is like very obviously very low heavy. And whenever I feel that I'm at already like kind of a good place with any particular project, and I do the same thing with mixes as well, is like I'm gonna start to, you know, compare to the reference. If I, you know, maybe if I went too far with something, or like whenever I play my my master or my mix, does it sound like it's a noticeable improvement in the right direction, or does it sound like I put my own taste too much forward? Maybe like sometimes this is what's gonna also happen, and you know, we're all humans, so it's just it's just what it is. But obviously, like if I notice that I went too far with anything, I'm going to dial back. Or if I feel that something was there in the rough mix that I maybe, you know, lost with any particular part of the processing chain, then I'm going to also address these issues. And this is also just to touch on this. This is probably better to do in most cases without the end limiting, because the end limiting is also going to affect the sound. And sometimes to get to a competitive loudness, you know, this is not so much going to be the case here, because as I've said, you know, I'm shooting for like relatively high loudness and relatively high energy, because we're talking about a dance song. But I'm also going to like take streaming into account. Like I don't want to like over push this song into like oblivion, into like a maximizer or anything. But still, you know, whenever I'm referencing the rough mixes, I generally speaking like to do this better when I have no output limiting already on what I'm referencing it against, you know, so my mix or master. And yeah, obviously I needed to like gain compensate a little bit to see what's up. And yeah, as I've said, I'm just going to make some adjustments, because if I feel that something is a little bit too much or like a little bit too little, then I'm just gonna have to adjust. As I'm now watching this footage back, it's just interesting to see that you know, I dial back so much from this panel, because doing these other adjustments here, you know, with the compression and the EQing and the imaging, it's like sometimes what happens is that these things already solve so much of the issues that, or like it wasn't probably even an issue, like a real issue in a sense. I just wanted to give it a little bit more taste, or like a little bit more flavor in the beginning, so that these things already do so much lifting for the track that it now sounds a little bit silly to also like start out everything with this like relatively noticeable flavor. It's so funny like watching back this footage that I you know, I went back to the SSL, you know, because maybe I wanted to like once again just, you know, check out how it was sounding previously. And what I did here is like, this is also like kind of interesting, is like if you've ever looked at these plugins in Plugin Doctor, then you also probably already know that whenever you engage the compression circuitry, so you just push this button that is turned on, it's already going to add different harmonics to the signal. And the same thing goes for the EQ panel. It's like you're essentially, so these plugins, like for example this UAD E-channel strip emulation, is pretty good at emulating the original unit's circuitry. So it's going to give you some extra harmonics. And this is what I wanted to test here, is like if I just engage the circuitry while actually setting the threshold and the ratio to like not even really do anything, is it going to sound like is this going to give it a more fuller and a more texture-rich type of beginning point for the whole song, as if I compared to using the API? And this is what I'm playing around with here. And yeah, again, I don't remember if this was the solution to the thing that I was looking for, but yeah, this is just something that's nice to know about in general, in my opinion. And seeing what I did with the attack and the release time here on this compressor, I was probably squashing the transients a little bit too much. And so I wanted to you know, obviously you have two routes to go for whenever this thing happens. It's like you can also like play around a little bit with the attack and release time, or you can just you know, ease up on the overall compression. Like these things can both solve this, but if you don't want to ease the actual compression, then the attack and release time, like playing around a little bit with them, and also I played around with the sidechain filtering a little bit so that it's not going to like push below 80 hertz. So the kick drum and the bass is a little bit less at play than everything else above. I was going for like even less attack, like even slower attack. And again, a little bit of a slower attack. What it's going to help with is that it's going to let the transients poke through a little bit more. Now at the end, I added another dynamic EQ, and again, this is one of the best things, one of the best tools that you can use in the case of like stereo masters when you don't have access to any other stems. I just wanted to like have a little bit more low-end control with this. Like again, you can set up the attack and the release times here individually for each band, which is like just great if this is what you actually need. What I'm also thinking about whenever I'm doing any sort of EQ or any compression moves on the output is like eventually this signal has to go into an output limiter, and what this output limiter is going to like mostly listen to is going to be the low end. So if the low end is too sustained, it's too boomy, if it's just too much in general, then that's going to like greatly affect the actual sound of the limiting procedure. Like if you have less low end, which is like more defined and a little bit more like controlled in a sense, like whichever way you can control it, that's generally speaking, you can also like push a song louder if you want. Like this is not always the goal, as I've explained it earlier. Like here it's not necessarily my goal to like make this the loudest song of all time, but you're also going to like affect, for example, transients less. You're also going to like add this like limiters have this tendency to give a little bit more high-end like sparkle, but it's in kind of a digital sense. Sometimes it sounds good, you know, especially with like dance music. It's usually not something that would go against any sort of like dancey vibe song, but sometimes limiters can create this, you know, kind of sort of like artificial high end in a little bit, and you can also avoid this by having a little bit less low end, which sounds weird, but this is how physics just, you know, going to play out, and yeah, this is how it works. And so yeah, this is what I probably also my one of my reasoning why I'm, other than just, you know, listening for the tonal balance, that other than just listening for the actual like sustained material in the low end, I'm also like usually trying to think about what's gonna happen when this thing hits the output limiter. As it turns out, what I was explaining, I already had this limiter on, which I didn't even like realize or like recognize. So the whole point is that then what happened, I guess because I just skipped through. Then what happened is that I loaded up the limiter, and I already noticed what I was explaining earlier, that, you know, the low end was eating into the material a little bit too much. Like if you have too much low end and the signal goes into the limiter that way, the low end is going to affect the high end. The high end won't affect the low end. It just doesn't have enough like frequency, like depth, or like I'm not sure what's the exact word that I should be using here. The whole point that matters is that as a concept that matters is that low end going into the limiter will have an effect on the high end, and so the less you have, the less overall effect you have on the high end, obviously. And depending on your attack and release times, which here they are not separate, you can just set a fast character like a slow character on this particular maximizer, but depending on your attack and release times on your output limiter plugin of choice, you might encounter like a little bit of like a pumping type of sound, or like distortion, depending on like really just how fast the attack and the release times are. And you can kind of like avoid, you know, trying to find a sweet spot between like two not so great qualities of any master by just lowering the low end that's going into the output limiter. And why dynamic EQs are a great tool for this job is because you can like leave the impression of the low end there, or by, you know, like leaving the transients intact, or like the exact reverse, like you can like reduce the transients, like if maybe some of the bass notes are like poking out a little bit, and those are the transients that are affecting in the low end, affecting the output limiter, then you can also reduce those. So it's just a great tool for this particular job. And obviously this is also part of every mastering and also obviously mixing job as well, that you know, you might want to correct for these like a little bit too noticeable like dynamic drops, or like dynamic like overflows. And here I just felt that the breakdown was getting a little bit too quiet here in this section at the middle. And so yeah, I just wanted to correct for it a little bit. And again, like looking at just the values, like 4 dBs are looking a little bit extreme to me. Just knowing how much this is going to translate and in reality. But if this is what felt right, and this is what worked for me, like whenever I'm in the flow, and whenever I'm listening to and working on any particular song, you know, at that moment, I kind of like have a pretty good idea. I'm only 22 minutes into this project, so I'm probably not even near reaching, and it's also like around noon, so I'm not even near getting like tired with my ears or anything like this. So if this is what felt right, then this is what were the right moves, most likely. And also part of any given mixing mastering procedure is to check for potential like export issues, which I just noticed here, like there was a click there in that part that I just exported. And yeah, in many cases I'm going to just use this RX9 declicking plugin, which, you know, in my experience will solve the issues like 90% of the time. Sometimes I might need to do and do this procedure manually one way or another, but yeah, if I can just solve these things with using a plugin, then it's obviously more convenient, and then why not? So, and this is also what I do here. And these declicking procedures also, like what I did here is like these are better done while not having the other processing on, partly because I want to just, you know, put back the solution into the same channel where it was. And also, like generally speaking, if so this click, how it plays out is in the source material. Whenever I apply all these processings to the source material, I'm also applying to this click. And so the actual declicking procedure is going to be less effective. Like obviously depends on what I was doing about the processing, but generally speaking, it's just a better idea to do this on the actual material, like the source material, to like correct things there, and then just add back the processing after, because it's like it's just going to be like a higher percentage solution than you know, doing the reverse. And then when this corrected piece of the puzzle is being put back, and then I can also just add fades, which is again, I could kind of like do this by having them on different channels, but it's again just so much more convenient to do it like this, adding these fades on just one single channel. And also, not to mention that if I do this the reverse way by applying the thing on the processing, if for example I send the first pass to the artist, and you know, he says that, you know, something is just not, you know, how he imagined it, and I have to revert any of the processings here, then I will also have to like redo this procedure with the bouncing and the declicking, and I just have to do all these steps once again for basically no reason, instead of like solving it right from the source material. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough, and I hope what I talked about makes sense. And yeah, if anything is not clear, please just leave a like under the video, and I'll try my best to answer it as soon as I can. And yeah, thanks for watching. And because I'm recording this during the holidays, I'm gonna say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone watching. And I'm not sure when I'm gonna publish this video, when I'm gonna actually edit it, but now finally I have a little bit of a time to just chill and record some videos, because yeah, I'm taking some time off, much like everyone else. And yeah, thanks for watching, and also Happy New Year if I wouldn't publish this video in time.